Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. Thank you so much to our Midwest BankCentre and Rising Bank customers for joining us here today. My name is Nicole Ersch, and I'm the Vice President of Sales Enablement and Culture Development. I want to say thank you before I kick it off. Thank you to our partners at CLA for joining us today and putting together this very timely presentation on cybersecurity, especially in light of all of the things that are coming forth due to COVID-19. Just a couple of housekeeping things before I pass it off to Tim. Please keep your phones and computers on mute. It helps cut back on the background noise and makes it easier for everyone to hear the presentation. And then second, we do have a chat feature as part of this WebEx. At the bottom right hand of your screen, you should see a little chat bubble next to the word chat. You can click on that and you can type your questions in there, and we'll do our best to address those at the end of the presentation. With that, I'm going to pass it off to our partner, Tim at CLA, to introduce our speaker.
Thanks, Nicole. Can you hear me okay? Nicole?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yes. Great. Just want to test there. Thanks again and welcome everyone for joining this morning. My name is Tim O'Shaughnessy. I'm the Managing Principal of the St. Louis office for CLA. First of all, a special thanks to Midwest Bank and Rising Bank team for allowing us to participate in this webinar. For those of you who are not familiar, we at CLA are a professional services firm that exists for one reason, and that is create opportunities for our clients, our people, and our communities. And we do this through our industry-focused wealth advisory, consulting, audit, tax, and outsourcing services. And I want to put kind of an explanation point. At CLA, we're not an accounting firm, but a professional services firm, hence the reason for us participating in this presentation here this morning. And within CLA, we have three business lines: our traditional audit and tax, wealth advisory, which we team up with Midwest Bank on, and our outsourcing practice, which consists of many industry-specific outsourced services, such as industry-specific outsourcing, finance department assessments, business valuations, and information security services, which is our topic this morning. There's a lot going on in this world, as I'm sure you've all heard or read in the papers, as it relates to information security and hackers that are trying to disrupt our lives, whether it be personally or through our businesses. So I hope you'll find this presentation very informative, as Nicole said, very timely. With that, I want to turn it over to our speaker, Randy Romas. And once again, just want to say thank you to Midwest Bank and Rising Bank for letting us participate this morning. Randy?
Thanks, Tim. Thanks, Nicole. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Today, we're going to talk about cyber fraud, risks and trends, and some high-level strategies for how to address the things the hackers are doing to make our lives miserable. Little bit about myself. I've been with CLA for 22 years. I lead the cybersecurity practice nationally. We started the practice in 1999 with 3 people, and we have a team of about 80 spread around the country. Before I started this out, I was the firm's poster child for alternative career paths. My grandfather referred to me as a professional student. In the 9 years it took me to graduate with an undergraduate degree, my wife-to-be started a year later. She completed a molecular biology pre-med degree, took a year off to be a VISTA volunteer, and then she went back and got a law degree. So a little bit different levels of focus, but I found my way. I had to get a letter from my dean to kick me out of school. Let me graduate as long as I promised not to come back. And I came out as a high school science teacher. So, talk about being thrown in with a pack of wolves, right? So taught high school science for 4 years. And in that period, I became a bit of a self-taught computer guy. I got in a master's program focused on educational technology, not teaching technology, but using it to teach our curriculum. And so in the early 90s, I built my own websites and put all the curriculum there. We didn't have electronic grade books, so I created my own grade books. We did all kinds of stuff in science. I was a science teacher, teaching the kids how to use tools to gather data, input the data into spreadsheets, and then data mine and manipulate. So self-taught computer guy. 4 years later, just before Y2K, if you had a pulse, you qualified for a technology company. And so I got a chance to make a career change and join a subsidiary of CLA that did IT consulting. So for the next 2 years, I bounced around in about 4 different roles. At that point, that 2-year period was where I got my formal training. They put me through all of the Microsoft certified system engineer training. And then we started the cybersecurity practice. So that's how I got into this. When I'm not doing this, I'm chasing these boys around in Boy Scouts. And I'm going to tell a quick story here, use a non-technical story to set a stage for a theme through the rest of this, right? What's the Boy Scouts motto? The Boy Scouts motto is be prepared. Prepared for what? We need to be prepared for anything, whatever the world's going to throw at us. So in Boy Scouts, we kind of live that all the time. The pictures here at the bottom are at a Boy Scout high adventure camp called Philmont. Boy Scouts has 4 high adventure camps. The Summit in the mountains of West Virginia, Sea Base down in Florida where you sail and snorkel and scuba dive, Northern Tier in northern Minnesota where they do all kinds of wilderness camping and winter camping, and then Philmont is in the mountains of New Mexico. And I'm our troops high adventure coordinator, and I've had the good fortune to take my oldest boy and my middle boy on trips to Philmont. We spend 2 weeks in the mountains backpack camping with everything we need in this backpack. 8 boys and 4 adults, everything we need except for food. We pick up fresh food every 3 to 4 days. And so when we go do this, we have to be prepared in 3 ways. I'm not 35 years old anymore. I can't just decide I'm going to go hiking for 12 days in the mountains. On an average day, we will hike 8 to 10 miles through various altitude changes. This first picture here, we're at about 6,700 feet. This second picture, we're a day out from going over this mountain in the background, and we're at about 10,000 feet. This third picture here, we're at the top of that mountain. We're at about 12,500 feet. So we have to physically get ready for the rigor, the hiking, the weight, and the altitude changes. Second thing, super important as we talk about the IT stuff, we have to get ready and practiced and accomplished with the tools and the gear. Many of you probably go camping from time to time, weekend camping, week-long camp. A lot of times it's what we call car camping. We very carefully in an organized manner put everything in the car. We drive to the campsite. We set up camp, and then we're good to go and we can relax, right? In backpack camping, everything has to be in this backpack here, right? This backpack this young man is wearing here. We can't just jam it in there quickly and go. So we have to get practiced and accomplished at setting up camp, setting up tents, setting up our cooking area, taking it down and packing it back up, because every day we go to a new campsite. Every day. The other thing that's important here is they have to get quick and efficient and have to be able to work as a team doing this. All the cool stuff they get to do, shooting, climbing, riding things, it's at the next camp. If they don't get things done on time, according to schedule, they don't get to the next camp on time. They don't get to do the cool things. And then the third thing, super important when we talk about cybersecurity, they have to be mentally and emotionally prepared. Think about this. When's the last time you spent 12 days with the same 12 people, 24 hours a day for 12 days, and you could not get away from them? You could never be more than, 40 yards away for safety purposes, because we have to work together, because we're isolated in the wilderness. We have to get mentally and emotionally ready for that level of working together in conflict. By about day 3 or day 4, the boys start to hit the wall. By day 5 or 6, some of the adults do. And so we have to do all this together. We have to work through it. We have to collaborate. So physically ready, process, mentally and emotionally. Those things come into play when we're dealing with the stressful world of keeping our IT systems running, the lights on, fending off the hackers, and dealing with incident response situations. So this Boy Scout Be Prepared is going to be a theme throughout all of this. What are we up against? When is a TV not a TV? You can see this. This is actually a little bit older advisory. This was a little over a year ago, but Samsung put out an advisory that said you need to run vulnerability scans and antivirus on your televisions. How many of you have antivirus installed on your television? I'm the cybersecurity guy. I don't have that. I don't even know how to get that, right? We have moved into a world where everything is connected to everything. So here's my next question. This works better when we're in an in-person presentation, but I say, raise your hand if you work for a technology company. And most people in the audience look at me and say, no, wrong conference room. It's the RSA conference is across the street at the Bellagio. Okay, bear with me. Put your hand down. Now, stand up if your business would be in a whole lot of trouble if you couldn't use your computer systems for 2 weeks because you got hit by ransomware, because your mainframe failed and you can't get hard drives to replace it because it's 20 years old. We live in a world where all of this stuff is networked and connected. This is not a bed. This is a computer that acts like a bed. This is not a TV. This is a computer that acts like a TV. These all have software with remote access, and they need to be managed and maintained. They need to be updated. People can change that software. You know, these cameras are tremendous convenience. Problem is they come with default login credentials that are known in the industry. We have business versions of all the same. Almost all of our businesses have some form of security camera. We have HVAC that's networked so people can monitor it. We've got a wide variety of things that are connected to our networks. All of these are doorways and gateways in. They all have an attack surface that we need to understand, we need to fine tune, and then we need to manage. So what are we up against? Different version of the Boy Scouts model from a couple of thousand years ago, right? Sun Tzu, the Chinese warlord. Know your enemy, know yourself. You can fight 100 battles without disaster. That's being prepared. What do we need to be prepared for? Well, like I said, I've been doing this over 20 years. Till about 10 years ago, most of the hacking we saw was not driven by financial gain. It was driven by people who had an axe to grind, who wanted to show how smart they were. They wanted to prove things. What's occurred in the last 10 years is organized crime has figured out how to make money at hacking. And so they've moved in. They've developed a black market economy to support this with business models that look like our business models. And they've got specialization to make this work. They are largely focused on theft of information, theft of credentials, or interference in operations. All three of those are methods for them to make money. Every year, Verizon Business Services comes out with a data breach analysis report, things they've investigated over the last year. For the last several years, they continue to determine that, you know, something on the order of 90% of the breaches that you see and hear about have some root cause in some form of phishing. In terms of that specialization in business models, there are groups out there, organized crime groups, selling and collaborating on selling methods and collaborating on how to do hacking, selling hacking software tool sets, selling support, selling techniques for how to break into a bank or how to break into a healthcare entity or how to break into a retail entity. So this is what we're up against. They will sell credentials. We've got to dump somebody hacked in, they stole a bunch of credentials, and they're going to turn around and sell them to a different group who specializes in using those credentials to make money. We still see credit card breaches popping up, not small ones, big ones, right? 5 million credit card numbers stolen in a breach. The value of those card numbers fluctuates. Sometimes in the past, they've dropped down to $2 or $3 a record. Sometimes they jump up to as much as $20 or $30 a record. Other types of records have different value amounts. If you can steal a complete set of healthcare information, that's got a different value to different groups. So this is an open market economy sitting out there on the dark web. That's who's behind most of it. Again, most of this is driven by email phishing. Email phishing's been around it's been around forever. The term phishing was coined probably about 14 years ago. That's when they started calling it phishing. And it has evolved over time. This is one of my favorite ones. I got this quite a few years ago, as you can see. And it's designed to cause alarm and make me act quickly without thinking, right? What's wrong with this message, okay? Why are 6 other people getting my cell phone bill? Gosh, I hope my partner pays my bill when he gets it. You notice in the body of the message, it doesn't say my name anywhere. It's not addressed to me. The logos and color schemes are right. The problem is, the amount. Good God, what did my son John do this time? Did he turn on his mobile hotspot at school for everybody to use and bypass the filters? This dollar amount is meant to make me react quickly in alarm without thinking and click on one of these links down here. View and pay my bill. Where does view and pay my bill go? Well, I don't know unless I do one of two things. I click on it, which would be a bad idea, or I put my mouse over it. If I put my mouse over the link and hover, I get this pop-up box. dancingdivaswear.com/Robin. That might be interesting. I wouldn't go there. That website, many years ago was hacked and it's serving up malware. So they're trying to convince me to click on the link because I'm alarmed and concerned. It'll take me to a website that's going to try to download malware and take over my computer, install a keystroke logger, or capture my credentials. This is an old version. They know what normal looks like. They know we all get an email once a month. It's time to pay your cell phone bill, right? Here's a more recent one. This one was pretty troubling. CLA, we're a big company, 7,000 people spread around the country, a lot of mobile workers. We get phished once a month. It's a test. It's a test of our awareness. It's a measure of our firm's training program. This was one of those messages. On a monthly basis, we're usually hovering on a click-through rate. Somebody looks at the message, clicks on the link, somewhere between about 6 and 10%. Pretty good. If you can get down into that 5 or 6% range, you're doing really good, and you're not likely to get any better than that. The problem with this message and with any of these is they try to catch us in a weak moment. Catch me not paying attention. And so imagine this. In May, what did all of the CPAs in a 7,000 person firm just get through? That mythical, dreaded busy season, right? Where they work 60, 70, 80 hours a week for about 4 months. They're exhausted, they're worn out, they're mentally drained. And all of a sudden, they get an email that says a complaint has been lodged against you. You have 7 days to respond, or you're going to lose your CPA license, right? They catch us at a weak time. We click on the link, we follow through, malware gets downloaded, all kinds of bad things occur. Never mind that this organization doesn't really exist. Never mind that CPA licensure is governed and managed at a state level, not at a national level. Never mind that they would never, whoever they are, reach out to you about a complaint in this manner with such a short deadline, expecting you to click, follow, go, and do. It's designed to catch 1 in 10 or 1 in 20 people. That's all they need for this to be successful. So, I said our firm's click-through rate 6 to 8%. Timing of this, the scope and nature of it was such, this one, our click-through rate was 45%. Think about that for a minute. You got 7,000 people. Do you think you could manage tracking down 4% who clicked on it, investigate their PC, figure out if there's malware or not? 4 or 5% of 7,000 is a big number, but it would be manageable. How does that change if it's 45% of 7,000 people? Stupid, simple math, right? 3,000 people. Do we have the resources to track down 3,000 endpoints? This is part of the being prepared message. The training, the awareness, the constantly hitting our people is part of the being prepared. Been a unique year. All kinds of fodder for the bad guys for new, previously unseen phishing scenarios. COVID put a whole lot of things in front of us that in the background, they're trying to accomplish the same thing. The message and the context is new, right? One firm in March and April determined that in a very short period, they determined over 20,000 new domains had been registered, www.something-or-other.com, related to COVID. These were all setups for phishing scenarios and landing sites people were going to be directed to in phishing scams. And then we saw an onslaught of these phishing scams. I've got about 8 or 10 slides here that go through a progression of COVID scenarios. And really the intent here, I'm going to skip through them pretty quick, but the thing I want you to think about is how this shows how quickly they adapted and changed and evolved their scenarios as the situations changed, right? So, how to avoid COVID scams. Click here and learn about it. In this case, trying to convince us, we're going to show you how to avoid COVID scams. And when you follow the link, you get this form we're used to seeing, right? This is a CAPTCHA. I have to enter that code to prove I'm a human. This must be a legitimate site, right? So if I enter the code and hit submit, what this web page is really doing is it's trying to launch Word and open a document from the web. And that Word document has a macro embedded that's going to try and run. The macro is going to reach out to the internet and pull down a different piece of code called a loader, Z loader. And what this is going to do then is it's going to go grab another piece. So this is like the old, let's launch a rocket to the moon. We need 3 stages. The first stage gets us a mile up. The second stage gets us into orbit. The third stage gets us from orbit to the moon. This is designed to have different stages to try and bypass the controls we have in place. As we move into April, we get a little bit different message. So this one, they're trying to get us to open this Excel document, which is the business plan for reopening our business in a COVID-safe manner, right? We're seeing lots of these all of a sudden. I need this to open up my business. This is urgent. I'm going to open this right away. When we open the Excel document, same thing, different method. The Excel document's going to try to download something similar and execute these macros. I actually got this one, and the macro was buried down deep in it. You had to enable about 2 times to make it run. It also was what you had to do to get it to show. So again, We go from March to April into May, right? And now we're starting to see transaction notices and things we have to do. So they're tweaking and adjusting the message. They're shotgunning these things out, trying to see who falls for it. We also see scams related to, how to set up and obtain your IRS payment, your PPP payment, your relief payment. So the variety of these is almost endless. Here was one looking to get small business administration application. All kinds of problems with this one, right? The dates and timing don't match. The vocabulary is odd or off. There's all kinds of telltale signs for people to pick up on. CLA, I like to take credit for coining this terminology. We call it 2 minutes of inconvenience. When the target gets this email, they have to be willing and able to take on the 2 minutes of inconvenience to stop and think, to pay attention, to not be rushed into this. If we stop and think and pay attention, we can recognize the telltale signs. We can keep our click-through rate down below 5 or 6%. We can really pay attention here. So why are they doing all this? Again, theft of information, theft of credentials, interference with operations. There's a whole lot of this activity that is focused on trying to get our username and password. Why? Well, how many of us have moved our IT stuff into the cloud, that magical, mythical thing called the cloud, right? We've got Exchange 365, Outlook 365, Office 365. We've moved all of our stuff to Microsoft, or we're in Amazon's cloud, or we're somewhere else. Well, as we do that, we're back to more and more controls, highly focused on username and credentials. So those phishing messages, if we go back a moment here, any of these messages that try to get us out to a website like this, that link could just as easily direct us to what looks like a login page for Outlook or Office 365. Choose your account. When you pick the account, supply your username. Once you've supplied your username, enter your password. This looks like Microsoft's page, but it's very easy to spoof it. So we could have something else instead of Microsoft. And we see lots and lots of this designed to drive the target to the site, enter their credentials, so the bad guys can harvest the credentials. Click and log in here. Here's what it looks like. You've logged in. We've harvested the credentials. Now they're going to try to take over our systems. That's the Office Online. We still see instances where clients also have remote access directly into their network. This could be a VPN. It could be a remote desktop session. So we see lots and lots of activity where the bad guys are actually sweeping and scanning the whole internet, looking specifically for the Microsoft remote desktop protocol to be available. And then they're either going to do a phishing attack like this to get credentials so they can log in here, or they're going to build an automated, password guessing attack to supply, I don't know why it keeps jumping, username and password in an automated attack format. If they can get into remote desktop, that means they've logged into almost for sure that they've logged into a server as an administrator. They're already super user, right? The dominoes start to fall very quickly here. So what do they do once they get in? Well, we've also got this issue of ransomware, right? So in the previous examples, going to the website, opening the document, Zloader might try to directly download ransomware. We see instances now where they go into and attack remote desktop. They get logged in as remote desktop users, and then they intelligently plant the ransomware. I'm going to plant the ransomware and take over. Ransomware's been around for a long time. First one to make a big splash in the news was Presbyterian Hospital. I foreshadowed this kind of. Presbyterian Hospital got hit. Their systems were down. They went without their systems for how long? I asked you all, how long can you operate without your systems? Can you operate for 2 weeks? Presbyterian Hospital was down for 2 weeks. Paper and pencil manual processes, redirecting patients and customers to other places. Much more recently, we saw BMO Harris in Canada get hit by it. In this case, several years ago, the ransom was $17,000. You notice here, more recently, the ransom numbers going up. These days, depending on who you talk to, the average ransom is anywhere from $500,000 to $4 million. How much it is sometimes is dependent on the type of organization that's being attacked. The ransomware basically, once it's placed, if it's the automated version, it's going to go right down your file system and encrypt everything it has access to. If it's a bad guy that's logged in through RDP as an administrator, he's going to go out and look and intelligently place the ransomware, maybe out on this web, this file share where we have the electronic backups stored. And then they're gonna leave the ransom note. So as I said, ransomware has been around for a while. The earliest versions, kind of experimental, they basically targeted consumers, lock up your personal files, ask for a ransom of about $400, right? And usually it's something down on the local machine. It attacks the local machine. It leaves the note behind. As it evolves and the bad guys, the business models improve, they improve it so that it can go out and it can automatically scan the network. It can look across the network for other systems it can infect, right? Then the latest versions, they go after the entire network. So they're going to go and infect things that have a file extension .BAK. What does .BAK stand for? That's the backup file. So the newer, more intelligent versions look for critical systems first, and then more broadly until everything has been taken over here. This used to be a problem isolated to Windows machines. It's no longer only Windows machines. There are versions and variants that can attack Linux and Mac systems, and they're getting very sophisticated. The very latest, right? This just came out a week and a half ago. FBI, DHS, and HHS, they put out an urgent alert warning of an imminent threat, credible threat to hospitals and healthcare systems that a group or groups of organized crime were ramping up and going to rapidly attack a large number of health systems. The other piece that's changed here, right? So I'm gonna go back to this. The early versions, consumer-focused individual systems. They encrypt the files, they leave a note, they just wait for you. They don't even know that they hacked you until you contact them saying, I want to pay. The later versions, they know that they've hacked you and they're waiting for you to respond. In the earliest versions of this, the anecdotal evidence was if we pay, we get our data back. The earlier versions of this were driven by the smarter, more disciplined hackers who knew if they pay and we don't release the data, this scam falls apart. If they pay, we have to release the data. As it evolves, similar to that earlier commentary, the first ones, they do it enough, they get lazy, like, I don't want to hack individuals anymore. I'm going to sell the software to others. So I'm going to make it software driven, easy to use. So now we get a lesser class of hackers doing it, not as smart, not as savvy, not as disciplined. So then for a period of time, we see a scenario where the business gets hacked, the ransomware's in there. We attempt to pay, and the bad guy doesn't release the key. The bad guy says, you waited too long, I want more, right? So they're not as disciplined, and we have more problems getting our data back. That's kind of gone back and forth, and there's still anecdotal evidence that most of the time, you probably get your data back. I'm not advising you pay. Every one of these situations is unique. So you have to go through each of them individually. Much more recently, what started to occur is the more sophisticated bad guys have figured out we're getting better. We've gotten better, and we've revamped our backup and restore process. So when the ransomware hits us, we can ignore them because we can restore from backup. Well, they figured that out and said, okay, we need a new lever. We need a new bit of leverage. So before we encrypt, we're going to steal the data. We're going to encrypt. Once we've encrypted, we show you, we have your data. In order for you to get it back, you need to pay us. If you don't pay us, we're going to release the data. So you need to pay us. So we give it back and we don't release the data. So that's the newest version we're dealing with here is a combination of they have intelligently attacked and gotten in. They have intelligently placed the media, the ransomware, and now they're demanding a ransom so that they don't release the data, and we have a breach we have to report, in the embarrassment and the loss of reputation. So this is really becoming a very challenging situation. It's exactly what everybody's dealing with. So how do we deal with it? This is my Boy Scouts motto. We need to be prepared. We need to know who our attackers are and what their motivations are. We've covered that. We need to know how they're trying to get in. I've told you where the attack surface is. Now we have to figure out, how do we defend? How do we mitigate? How do we manage that attack surface? It's really been thrown upside down on us here in the last year because of COVID, where we've gone from, in some cases, a 15% remote workforce to an 85% workforce that's remote. So we're going to go through a couple things here at a high level, right? This is what I called standards-based operations. Again, raise your hand if you're a technology company. Stand up if you can't function without your technology. Whether we like it or not, we're technology companies. We're highly dependent on the technology systems, the data systems, and the data. We can't operate without it. So we need to act like a technology company. Standards-based operations, people, rules, and tools. Define how we're going to do business, how our systems are going to be operated, how they're going to be configured, how we monitor, and how we react and respond. That standard should be based off of a governance or compliance framework. In financial institutions, we've got FFIEC and GOBA as the primary regulatory drivers. Healthcare, we've got the HIPAA security and privacy rule and/or meaningful use. When we get outside of healthcare and financial institutions, there's a wide variety of other standards. Most of them are not regulatory based. We also have industry or contractual standards. PCI DSS is the credit card security standard. It is a contractual obligation between parties. Merchants are contractually obligated to their financial institution, the acquiring institution, the payment gateway, all those terms are used. Service providers are anybody who's part of the payment process, but doesn't necessarily receive a payment directly. So you could be a managed security service provider. You could be a hosting provider. You're helping manage the payment process. You can impact the security of the card data. Then the PCI standard applies. We've got other standards-based frameworks like the CIS critical controls, NIST, ISO, COBIT, COSO. There's a wide variety of them. Here's the secret. Pause for dramatic effect. They all say the same thing. They all largely require the same thing. They use slightly different vocabulary. They put things in different order. There might be slightly to somewhat different priority or focus, but they all say the same thing. So the good news is there's nothing new under the sun here. So standards-based, pick a framework. Which one? It doesn't matter. Pick one. I, at this point, talk about the CIS critical controls for several reasons. It's been around for a long time. It's in version 7. So that means it's been updated at least 6 times. Some of you might be familiar with this. It used to be called the SANS critical controls. SANS and CIS partnered. CIS has since taken it over. So we're in version 7. It's already prioritized for you: basic, foundational, and organizational. They have good data that shows if you can address the first 6 controls, you will address 85% of your cybersecurity vulnerabilities. There is a lot of detail behind each of these 20 for what it is, how it works, what it means. This is very scalable. This works for small organizations up to national and international enterprises. The other couple reasons we really stress this one is CIS has partnered with an organization called Audit Scripts, and they have built a mapping tool that maps every one of these control frameworks and a whole lot more back to the CIS control. So it's kind of a universal translator. There's an Excel workbook. I don't think I put the link in here. If you want it, you can email me and I'll send a link to you that has all of the conceivable frameworks mapped back to the CIS critical controls. So from a standards perspective, very well organized. It's been around a long time. It's vetted. It's prioritized for us. Another reason why we like the CIS controls is behind all of this, they have a lot of tools to manage it. How do we implement inventory and access controls? How do we perform continuous vulnerability management? How do we manage administrative credentials? They have benchmarks and checklists for hardening and configuring everything under the sun. Operating systems, server software, cloud providers, mobile devices, network devices, desktop, multifunction. They have checklists for how do you harden a Ricoh multifunction printer, scanner, or copier. They have checklists for all kinds of operating systems. They have checklists for every Windows operating system under the sun. How do I harden and configure Windows desktop operating system, Windows IIS web server, Exchange server? We're moving all of our stuff to the cloud, right? I talked about this. If you click on this link right here, they have checklists for hardening your systems in Amazon, in Google, in Microsoft. So they have benchmarks for what are the key security and monitoring settings and how do you tune them to fit your organization. Microsoft has a wide variety of resources for tuning and hardening your Microsoft in the cloud stuff. We've got a lot of clients that have migrated to Office and Exchange 365, and they do it because they say, we don't have the resources or training to manage this in-house. If we go to Microsoft, they'll take care of all this for us. Kind of not the case. In fact, I've got a large financial institution client. You know, just for context, they're about $4 billion in assets, so they're pretty good size. They started a process of moving to the cloud about 8 years ago. They said, we're doing it, help us do it right. And so we've done it right. Part of it was we don't have the people, the training, we can't keep up, we need to get it here. Well, you know, every year, twice a year, we kind of have a strategic touch point. Last year we were having that discussion, and Jeff comes to me. He had an aha moment. He said, you know, we came to realize, you know, we needed to get to cloud, and it accomplished a lot, but the features and the functions change so fast, we can't keep up with what's going on, and they're not really doing it for us. We need our own cloud engineer in-house. The need for that expertise didn't go away. It just shifted. And so resources like this are critical, but we need the people who know how all this works. So my first part of the mitigation is standards-based operations. Pick a framework, develop your standards, configure and operate against your standards. Within that, you do need to have a process to manage exceptions. Exceptions are going to happen. They're okay. They just can't be the rule, right? We need standards-based operations with a process to acknowledge, risk assess, accept, and operate exceptions. Once we've done that, now we need to manage and monitor on an ongoing basis. Keep it tuned. The infrastructure we have already has a tremendous amount of this built in. We need to know what it is. We need to turn it on, and then we need to manage it. Whether this is in-house systems, managing and monitoring utilization, bandwidth, success and failure, who touched each object, or we're out in Office 365 doing the same thing, we need to know what it is, we need to turn it on, we need to tune and manage it, and then we need to recognize, what do we pay attention to? Day-to-day operational DNA. I'm gonna jump back to a second to PCI. I mentioned PCI credit card security standard, right? A lot of you probably contractually need to be compliant with PCI. A lot of times this gets thrown over to the IT folks. Just do this. This looks like an IT thing. And it's very easy for them to go through this checklist and say, yes, we do this. Yes, we do this. Yes, we do this. What we have found over time is when they don't take those PCI controls and bake them into daily operational DNA, it becomes more of an audit. Well, you know, once a year we're going to do this, and the stuff is never there. It's never right. It's always just a bolt on at the end. So whether we're talking about operational IT, tuning, monitoring, and managing, or things like PCI compliance, you need to bake those controls and the monitoring into daily operational DNA, business as usual. And that means the people have to have time to do it. At some point, periodically, something outside the system should test and validate that the stuff inside the system is working properly. It's doing what we expect. It's behaving the way we expect it to. Vulnerability scanning, IT auditing, tabletop exercises to verify that processes are working, are pretty important. All of those governance and compliance frameworks have some element of some form of independent testing, independent of the administration and monitoring function. So if you have a team of 10, 8 or 9 of them are doing the daily operational administration, and somebody's in a security role, usually that security role is independent of the administration. It's not their job to set up new users, to change passwords, to configure systems. That's what we mean by independent. You know, COVID gave us the new wrinkle that this thing here, it became part of your network, right? It's now the endpoint of your network. So you've got the employee, the 3 kids, and the spouse working there with all the other stuff. So how do we manage that? That in and of itself is a process. We have to go back and review our standards. Do they need to be updated or changed? Do those updates or changes introduce exceptions we have to track somehow? And how does this change our monitoring and alerting? We've got some clients that said employees can only use business issued systems, and we can manage and control those pretty well. We've got others that said we're going to have to let employees use personally owned home devices. That gives a whole different set of risks that we have to explore in terms of what kind of data can they have, download, what kind of data can they interact with, how do we change and manage our monitoring? So that's a fairly unique conversation every time, because every business is in some way significantly different, because your people are different, your business is different, the number you have is different, how much you had pre-staged is different. Looks like I'm coming up on time here. I think I've got about 7 minutes left. Last couple slides I'm going to talk about everybody's favorite topic, passwords, right? As more and more of us move to that cloud remote access everything, we're back in this situation where we're more and more dependent on passwords. So I got 2 or 3 slides here. This one, you know, the focus starts with a password audit. So when we do an internal security assessment, we'll do a password audit. Basically what that means is we go find the master password file in the master system, we download it, and we run a password cracking program. We want to crack the passwords and then check to see the level of compliance with standards, right? A standard password policy is going to say passwords need to be somewhere between 8 and 10 characters long. They need to have a mix of uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols, right? And if we follow Microsoft complexity, we have to have 3 of those 4, and then we're going to expire them regularly. So we're going to use those old rules, and we're going to look at this password cracking exercise. The company had almost 900 users. We cracked 794 of those passwords in under 3 days. Most of them were cracked in less than a day. Of the 694, 63 were all letters. If they're all letters, can we accomplish the mandate of complexity? 3 of the following 4 uppercase, lowercase, numbers, and symbols? No. If they're all letters, the best we could hope for is uppercase and lowercase. So that would be a fail. 5 of them were all numbers. So we can only hit 1 of these. 200 of them were a word with a number on the end. So here's the aha, scary, funny moment. Our data tells us, we've been doing this 20 years, I can guarantee this. If your organization has 90 or more people, I can guarantee somebody's going to have a password that looks like this. Uppercase, lowercase, numbers. I've met complexity long enough. In this case, of those 200, almost all of them were the current or the most recent season with the number added to the end. Why is that a problem? Well, I'm going to jump backwards here. What we've found is the bad guys will find your remote login and they will create a great big list of usernames, all the usernames they can find with a single password, right? Summer 20. They'll go down, they'll try every single user account with this password on the login. If Joe's account fails, Tammy's account fails, Sam account fails once, that is not going to lock them out. Nobody's going to become aware. If that list fails, they'll wait a day and they'll try the next one. So, understanding and knowing what they're doing can help us be better equipped, right? 6 were the same as the username. So the right here, we've got 10% of the accounts. I'm sorry, 10% that are not compliant with the simple stuff here. What we need to do is we need to teach and train our people how to choose and remember good passwords, and we need to give them some better tools. Now, before I move on, it says old rules here. The old rules and guidance came from NIST about 15 years ago. Passwords need to be long. Do you remember what long was 15 years ago? Oh my God, how are we going to remember a 6-character password? They need to be complex. And most importantly, we need to change them regularly. Well, what we found over time is this piece here, this is getting really messy, in combination with these is what leads to people choosing what I call stupid simple passwords. They write them down. They're easy to remember. They cycle them because the last one was 19. Or we force them to change them every 3 months, which means the last one wasn't summer 20, the last one was spring 20. And the one before that was winter 19. So there is new guidance from NIST. It came out about a year ago. It says, make the passwords as long as you can manage them. Do not force complexity. When you make them long, you'll get complexity naturally. When they're long and complex, you don't need to expire them. The only reason to expire them is because we think they've been compromised. If we don't think they've been compromised, don't expire them. Don't force them to change. So we need to support that with multi-factor. When I log in on my phone, I have to use a multi-factor authentication app. So I have to click a button and then I have to pick a code. That code expires. That is probably the best way to do this. The other thing we recommend is a password management like LastPass. So I create it the first time, then I don't have to remember it. So we want to move to passphrases. Long natural language. This one is unforgivable. This one is just plain terrible. This one is painful to try and remember and type. This one's really good. Natural language, maybe not totally natural. Who's doing wet? Who's doing wallet painting lamp? This one in my mind is the best. Packers always beat the Bears. Easy to type, easy to remember, long and complex. Nobody's going to guess this one. And then we supplement that with password management tools. We need those standards. Within those standards, you need to have inventories of your key systems and applications. Ransomware is the biggest end risk we have. You need to go back to your IT shops and say, prove to me you can do a full metal backup and restore. I want to know you can do that once a month for 3 months. Why 3 months? If there's any IT folks in the audience, you know Microsoft changes their software with updates once a month, Patch Tuesday. We want to make sure the backup process works regardless of the changes in software. You remember the three things I talked about for the Boy Scouts? Physical, process, and emotional. We need to know they can manage all three of those through a backup process in a controlled situation. So when the bad event occurs, it's ransomware, it's Thursday at 10 o'clock at night, they can do it under pressure. You really need to test and audit for weaknesses periodically. All the governance and compliance frameworks call for this. They almost always say at least annually or after significant change. Nobody thinks it's a good idea for the bookkeepers to review and certify the books. The same should apply to our IT because of how critical it is and how dependent we are. Disciplined documentation, disciplined observations, exception management, and practice. And so I'm right at the limit. I will hang around as long as need be to answer questions.
Thank you so much, Randy. And thank you, Midwest BankCentre and Rising Bank customers, for joining us today for this very informative presentation on cybersecurity. We will be sending out an email that has a copy of this presentation in addition to a survey. So if you could take a few moments just to complete that very brief survey. And then in about a few weeks, we'll send out a video of this recording in case you want to refer to that. Again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to our partners at CLA for putting this presentation together. Be well and have a great day.
And Nicole,
yes,
one quick thing. If anybody's questions, feel free to email or call me. Happy to field questions or dialogue a little bit about pressing issues.
Thank you, Randy.